we're going to get to Layla next from the USA. What's up there, Layla? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. So what do you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about the concept of hell and afterlife, like in general, and how it could be both a positive and negative thing. And I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then if we had any time left, I was wondering about deconstruction and how it's like different from deconversion or just like changing your mind because I've heard like some of the hosts use it before, but I just didn't really understand what they were talking about. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so we could start with the hell discussion and then go from there. Would you mind,
Sure.
I guess, maybe starting off by kind of elaborating, like what is your concept of hell? Like, what does it include? What does it take to get there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the concept of hell is kind of like, I guess, I don't want to speak very simplistically, but where people, I guess, bad people go, right? And also like depending on like what religion you're in, right? Like some people think that everyone who's like not of their religion is gonna go to hell. Whereas I guess I think that it kind of depends, because God knows what's in everybody's like soul and heart and mind, that only he knows like who's going to go to hell or not. Like you can't say that this person's gonna go to hell for this reason. You know what I mean? Because you don't really know. I don't know if I
Okay.
answered that well, but if you have a follow up question, I can kind of answer it better.
I don't know, Chad. Do you have any follow
Yeah.
up?
I mean, it sounds very similar to what I believe growing up. So, it depended on, of course, your works, but also the way I was raised, we were taught that, just by being human, we were inherently sinful. And by default, we're going to go to hell unless we believed in Jesus Christ. Is that similar to what you believe?
Not really, because in Islam we don't have the idea of an original sin.
Okay, I see. Oh,
So it's just
so
based on it's just based on your actions and your beliefs, but it's not like inherently you're bad or good. You have the capacity for both.
I see. Why would a god then like create something that he knew or it knew it would have to destroy later in a hell?
That's a good question. I think, you know, there's no way for me to see inside of God's mind and know for sure like what he was thinking. But if I was to guess, like based on what I think, it's just about the concept of free will, if that makes sense, and not controlling like the choices of the people that create. I guess that would be it, right?
Well, so the problem with free will that I have is that if God is supposed to be omniscient, which I'm not too familiar with the interpretation of God in Islam, does Islam contain like an omniscient, like all knowing God?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I guess you would agree then that God knows the future.
yeah,
Okay, then God would from the very beginning of time, God would know exactly what I'm going to do. Like I've got this fidget spinner. It's an American one, and God would
yeah,
know whether or not I'm going to drop this right now. Right,
sure, yeah.
right. So whether I drop it or not, this is something that God already knows is going to happen. And do you believe that God has a plan? Like God has crafted a plan for humanity and everything?
Well, like Christian, our belief system, there is a plan. Like not, I guess more like fate. Like fate exists, but it's not unchangeable. If that makes sense. Like if you repent or try to come back to God, God could change your fate for you. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, but yes, it does. But at the same time, I feel like there's a contradiction there with God knowing the future. Because if God knows the future, then he knows that you're going to change your mind. And so it's not really changing anything. It's just following what God already knows or what God has already planned.
That's fair, but I don't know, and I could be wrong, right? I'm open to being wrong, but maybe like knowing that somebody's gonna change their mind is not the same thing as like forcing them to, right? So this still doesn't go against like the
Well,
concept of free will, like necessarily, right? Or maybe not. I don't know. It
well,
depends on your perspective.
I mean, it definitely depends on your view of God's plan, because if God has a plan and he's crafted like human existence with this plan in mind, then he's definitely crafted
Yeah,
it to where you're going to make a decision, right? So it really depends on how involved God is in this plan. And I would say that if God
that's
isn't
fair.
fully involved in this plan and he doesn't control the plan, he doesn't control like what future is actualized, then he's not really omnipotent, is he? But meaning he's not really all powerful.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I guess to clarify what I was saying earlier, so it could be more clear. It's kind of like the circumstances that you're born into, right? Like your country, your race, your religion, your gender, things that are like inherent about you. Like he decides that, right? But that doesn't mean necessarily that he decides what you do. He just knows what you're going to do, but that's up to you. You know what I mean? Maybe.
So let me posit something here. So let's say that
Sure.
someone is born in a remote part of the world that is pretty much uncontacted, uh, that doesn't have a knowledge of this God, that doesn't really interact with people outside of their community or tribe or what have you, and they live their entire life and never turn to that God. Didn't
Yeah.
that God kind of set them up for failure?
Not really, because in Islam, everyone's judged like based on their knowledge of God. So if you never heard of God in your life before, then you're not gonna get punished for that. Like God's just gonna judge you based on like basic principles of being a good person that you would be aware of, like in your tribe or your remote area. Like he's not gonna judge you with like the full knowledge if you don't have the full knowledge, if that makes sense. And like some Muslims believe that in the afterlife, like people who didn't weren't fully aware, they're gonna have their own like other tests for God to like
So
test them in a way that's like different, if that makes sense. Like based on like what they know, like in while they're alive and stuff.
So based on what you're telling us, isn't it better if
Yeah.
people just don't know and maybe just shut up about the whole God concept, and that way more people have a better shot of getting in if they don't know who this God is? It seems a little counterproductive.
That's a really good point, to be honest. Like I don't know if you ever heard there's this like Native American chief and he was like asking this like Christian missionary about that. And he was saying, if I didn't know about God, like would I go to hell? He said no. And he said, why did you tell me? Right? That's what you're making me think about. But at the same time, I guess it's good in the sense that it gives society structure and rules to follow, and it could kind of influence people to do the right thing, maybe. So that's why it would be good for that purpose. If you're trying to move society in a specific way, like based on like whatever the religion is, it wants to move society in a specific way, right? Um,
You
is it okay if I talk more about something I was trying to say earlier, but just kind of like slipped my mind?
well, I
Oh,
did I did want to address one thing real quick.
Oh, sure.
So
Go
yeah,
ahead. Go
you
ahead.
actually Yeah, you actually answered another question I was about to ask you, because you started saying at the very first that hell could be a positive and a negative thing, and at that point, up until
Yeah.
what you just said, I hadn't heard anything about the positive. All I heard was the negative stuff, like like
Yeah.
oh, God
Yeah.
will judge bad people and send them to hell and everything. So what you're saying, and I'm trying to make sure I'm hearing this right, is that you're saying that hell can be a positive thing because it moves society forward, human society.
Oh, it's interesting that you asked that question because that's the thing I wanted to go back to. Like, I wanted to clarify, like, right now, like, how it could be a positive or negative thing. I actually wasn't thinking that, but that is really good extrapolation skills that you have there. Just wasn't was on my mind at the moment. What I was thinking is that the reason that hell could be a negative thing is that maybe it would make some good people stressed out if they don't know if they're going to go to hell or not, because there's no really, again, there's no way to see what's in God's mind. Even like Islamically speaking, like we have a story of like this prostitute who like people thought at the time was going to go to hell, but then she fed some dogs and she didn't. And then this other like Islamic religious guy, people thought he was going to go to heaven, but then he was like rude, like people in society, and he was a cruel person, and so he didn't. And so I feel like that same story could give someone like comfort because they feel like there's still a chance for them or there's always hope, but it could also make someone stressed out because they won't know where they're going. And also in the sense, I think hell is good because, or a sense of an afterlife in general, is because there's a lot of unjust things out there, right? Like, for example, I'm Palestinian, right? So like my people are going through a genocide and stuff. I feel like it'll be very hopeless for me if I don't believe in an afterlife, because then it's like all these people who I cared about, right? They just spent their whole life suffering and they didn't get any justice or time to like enjoy life. That's why the concept of the afterlife is good for like them, or for like to put my mind to rest, I guess, in that sense. So I'm not like so distressed by the whole situation that I can't function, because I think, okay, they're going to get a do-over. Like whoever mistreated them, not just them, but also, you know, like pedophiles who get away with it, like bad people and things like that. And whatever pain like someone's going to go through, God's going to make it up for them. But the reason that it's negative is because it's definitely a fear tactic. I mean, I feel like religion is definitely a carrot and a stick, right? And especially for me, because I've gotten less religious than I used to be, because I don't believe in certain things as much anymore. And that actually made me a lot happier. But when I started to get happier, I was kind of like, this is a sign that like God doesn't care about me anymore, you know, because he's letting me go astray and not worry, which means that my soul is just forsaken. So that kind of freaked me out. So like the more distant I get from like the ritual, like I still believe in a lot of the philosophy and stuff, and I think that's good. But the more I get away from the ritualistic things, like, you know, praying and things like that, and dressing modestly, and I also change some of my like moral opinions as well, then I start to freak out because now I'm not 100% doing Islam, so I don't know like where I'm gonna end up. So that kind of freaks me out. But the fact that it exists in
Well,
general kind of makes me feel better because there's a lot of bad people out there. I don't know if that makes sense.
well,
You know
so
what I
so
mean?
if I can, if I can push back on one thing, I feel like all of this is predicated upon a certain understanding of what it means to be good and bad, because I feel like you
Yeah,
have
that's
a very
true.
good sense, a very good sense of what good and bad is, just by the
Yeah,
different groups of people that you've mentioned that you think would go to hell. But
yeah.
I mean, what do you think about the different Quranic verses? Like I'm looking at, and you know, I come from a very Christian background, just like Chad. So it's
Oh,
Quran
that's nice.
973. It's the at
Hmm.
Taba book, I
Hmm.
believe. It
Yeah,
says,
yeah,
O prophet, struggle against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be firm with them. Hell will be their home. What an evil destination. So, I mean, this is coming from the Quran.
yeah.
I'm wondering, how do you square that with your particular view? Because it seems to me like the good and bad here is determined on whether or not you believe in Allah.
Right. That's a really fair question. So it honestly depends on where you're reading in the Quran, because there's another verse that says like those who believe and do good and give charity and take care of orphans, whether they be Jews, Christians, Muslims, or Sabians, will have their reward with their Lord, right? So sometimes it's hard to know, like, what was the final say? What did we finally decide after the different opinions? But I think it depends on how you view it, because it is the majority view of Islamic scholars that somebody who wasn't exposed to the idea of God in the right way, that they're only accountable for what they know. And there's also other verses in the Quran that say that like only God knows like what's in your heart and what's in your soul. So it's hard. That's why I guess I'm trying to say that it's hard to be fully assured, because there's kind of some assurances like, oh, God knows what's in your heart, and if you do these things, you're a good person. But then on the other hand, there's these other things like, oh, if you do this, you're going to go to hell. So it's hard to know for sure. That's what I would say, right?
Okay.
That's what my
If I can slightly push back against that, because you're right, there is one
yeah, of
verse in
course.
there, but it doesn't really, like, your explanation doesn't exactly combat what I just brought up.
That's fair.
Primarily
Yeah.
because it, from what I'm reading here, at least, it says, indeed, the believers, Jews, Christians, and Sabians, whoever truly believes in Allah, a God, and the last day, and does good, will have their reward with God in
Yeah.
heaven, with Allah in heaven. But
Yeah.
my issue was that it says that the disbelievers and the hypocrites will go to hell. So it kind of seems like it's still specifically citing that, like Chad and I, despite all the good that we're doing in our lives, we're still going to get sent to hell. We would be classified as bad people under this kind of system here. Do you see how we still fall into the going to hell category?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that's definitely a real concern. That's also something I've looked into in the past, right? And from what I found, which might not be, correct, but it's a possibility. The word that translates to disbelievers in English is kafir in Arabic. And according to some articles I've read and based on what some scholars have said, there's a difference of opinion on how that should be translated. If it should be translated purely as disbelievers, as in, oh, they just simply don't believe in God, versus how it was being used at the time as more as people who were in defiance against God. Because in some of the verses, right, the same word, like kafir, that is now here translated as disbelievers, is used against people who kind of believe in God, but they don't want to accept the religion because it would be inconvenient for them. Like, they know that it's true, but they don't want to change their lifestyle or their cultural tradition. They want to keep holding on to what they already believed. And I talked to an imam about this directly, and I was like, I don't really think that it's right, especially because I live in the U.S. I feel like it might be harder to think like this in abstract when you don't live around people of a lot of different religions. But because I'm American, like half of my friends are like Christians or atheists, right? So I don't feel comfortable thinking that like people I care about is gonna like burn forever. Like that's kind of crazy, right? So I was talking to him. I was like, what about this? And he's like, that's not what that means. Like God, it's only talking about people who are like defiant against God or want to distort religion. If you simply don't believe, that's not a problem. So there's a difference in opinion about that.
Well,
You know what I'm
I
saying? But
I feel
I'm
like
definitely more progressive when it comes to that than a lot of other people, for sure, as well.
right. I mean, just with my own Christian background, like, the Bible definitely portrays anybody that doesn't believe in God as being fools, and how they really know that God exists in their heart, and they're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know if there's necessarily something analogous to that in Islam, but I can see how we
there
would
could be.
still be in that particular group, though. And I'm going to hand this over to Chad, because
Sure.
I don't
Go
know,
ahead.
I definitely want to praise you right now for being more progressive in your interpretation of Islam, because there's obviously a very bad direction you could go with that. So I definitely commend you
Yeah,
for being more progressive about it. But still feel like
thank
there's
you.
some things that I'm at odd with there personally. But anyways, what are your thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out a couple things. First of all, what you said about, injustice, and how it does seem like, there is a comfort in knowing that there is a final judgment and everything in the afterlife, and all that can be very comforting, especially when there is so much justice in the world, including in what's happening in Palestine, which I agree is a huge injustice and needs to stop. So it seems like you
Thank
have
you.
a very well-honed sense of justice. That being said, what I'm also hearing from you is an uncertainty as to exactly what the rules are. So what I keep hearing is, well, no one really knows. Well, there's a hot debate. Well, there was a chance, but maybe, maybe not. No one can know the mind of God. And if no one can know the mind of God, and if there's so many differing ideals, and there's so many what we pretty much kind of just described as contradictions, even in the Quran, as to who is making it to
Yeah.
heaven and isn't, how is that justice?
I'm sorry. I guess I didn't really understand your question. Is there any way for you to rephrase it?
Sure, absolutely. So if you are trusting in the idea that there is justice and a judgment in the afterlife, but no one is really sure exactly what the rules are, or no one's really sure who is and who isn't going to heaven, how can that be justice when not everyone is judged by A, the same standard, and B, knows all the rules?
That's a fair question, and I don't know if this will completely answer the question, but I guess the way that I see it is because God knows everything in your heart and mind, He's going to judge you based on your intentions and the level of sincerity you have and just your life experience is going to take it all into account. So I don't actually think it's fair for everyone to be judged the same way because like say for example you have like severe religious trauma and then that's why you leave Islam and then someone else is just like what it's talking about in the Quran like they know the truth but they just don't want to follow it. It's not fair to be judged for the atheism the same way because God has to take the trauma into the account, right? And the life experience. I think everyone should be judged like according to their circumstances. I mean, that's like the difference between like equity and equality. But that can't really be extrapolated to God because that's more of a human concept. But just to like give a parallel in a way, if that makes sense.
But you see, that's where I'm kind of hung up because you're saying that
That's
you
fair.
would see it as being judged by this, that, and the other, but then at the same time you
Yeah,
don't know the mind of God. So how do you know that it's actually true justice and not just what you think might happen, but it could be something entirely different when we get there?
that's fair. I guess I'm just trying to have some humility because at the end of the day, I'm just a person. So versus like a being who created and knows everything, I can't definitively 1000% say something like about this issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm getting hung up on it because it just doesn't seem to me like that's a really good system or one that an omnipotent God that actually did want to have human followers would do. But I do want to leave you with one other question. Um,
Okay.
I heard you
Thank you.
describe hell earlier as burning forever, right?
Uh, Pretty much, based on what I know, or some other form of torture, but
Okay,
fire is mentioned for sure. Yeah,
but eternal torture, in other words.
yeah. According to
Okay,
the majority of opinions, that would be the case. Yes,
and that is the souls of people who die who God judges didn't make the cut, right? For whatever reason.
yes, yeah.
Okay. Souls don't really have a central nervous system, do they? They don't have a brain, spine, nerves, and all that. That's what a body has, right?
That's a good point.
So, why would a god make a soul that feels pain specifically for that torture? That doesn't seem to me to be anything but cruel and unloving.
That's fair. I guess, in
I
the
wouldn't
sense
want to know
of,
that God's mind.
um. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I said I wouldn't want to know that God's mind because it's kind of sadistic.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Um, I think it's just based on, I mean, based on what he determines justice is, that's the punishment or reward that he prescribes, to be honest with you. That's it does say in the Quran that his mercy is greater than his punishment. And also like based on our belief, like the there are intercessors on the day of judgment who will advocate for you if you give them a reason to do good things. So it's kind of complicated. But at the end of the day, I guess since God knows everything, right? According to my belief, He's not going to put anyone in hell unless he has a good reason to, and he knows everything about the person while I only know the surface level, right? So I can't really make that determination. I don't know,
So,
but that's
well,
what
yeah,
I guess.
and that's kind of where it breaks down for me. So, in the first place, we don't really have evidence that a God exists at all. So that's where I first start to stumble. And the second, you know, we have a God that doesn't really make all the rules clear and provides a clear path in your belief to go to heaven. And third, if you get something wrong and you don't know what it is and you're on edge and you're not sure about it, you face eternal torture in a sense that a God created you to be tortured for all eternity. All three of those things point to me like none of this makes sense to me, and I don't see myself ever finding any comfort in this belief, and for that reason I'm out.
Oh, that's fully fair. I mean, I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. Obviously,
I
like
agree.
you're older than me. Like, no offense, not in a rude way, right? But you
Yeah.
probably have reasons to think what you think, and I'm not going to change your
Chad,
mind,
you old as
right?
fuck.
So
It's
I
fair.
respect that.
It's fair. I am old Zell.
Now I'm old as fuck too. Layla, sorry to interrupt what you were saying there, but I know that you were
That's
also
okay.
wanted to talk about something about deconstruction, and unless there
Yeah.
was anything that you wanted to follow up with the hell discussion, we could probably address whatever questions you have about that.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. I guess I was wondering because I was watching some of the videos that Thomas made and this other woman made. I forgot her name, but she has black hair, and they were talking about like the concept of like submitting to your husband and why that's not a good idea. And at first, I was just kind of neutral about it because I guess it's something that's not really talked about. It's just in the scripture, but no one really like forced it on me or anything. So I was just kind of like, okay, like let me watch this. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, this is a really convincing argument. Like, I guess I believe this now, right? And that kind of made me
Mm-hmm.
think like if there's a possibility to get better, like mentally, I guess, or even intellectually, but not 100% like leave the religion you're in if that's not what you want to do, if that makes sense. Or if it's like deconstruction is the same as like changing your religion. So I guess that was, yeah, I just had some thoughts about that. I just wasn't sure, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'm not part of the more I hate to say it like this. I'm not I haven't really been part of the more modern deconstructionist movement because I was
Okay.
deconstructing before I really recognized the term for it. For me though, as far as going through deconstruction, it was more about critically analyzing what I already believed and trying to figure out if I had good reasons to believe in that thing. And the result is either becoming more informed about what I believed and why I believed it, or changing my beliefs so that it better comports with reality. And just over successive analyses of what I believed and why I believed it, I eventually left religion. Now, some people out there they can deconstruct their views and come away still religious, but just a different a different flavor of whatever religion, or in a totally different religion. I think that deconstruction, and I know that Justin, at least I saw Justin in the chat, maybe he can clarify from his end on it because I feel like he's a little bit more of an expert in this than I am. But I feel like deconstruction is all about just breaking down your currently held beliefs and re-examining them and either getting better reasons to believe it, or changing your beliefs entirely so that they better comport with what you actually believe. So,
That's fair.
what's your take there,
I guess,
Chad?
okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
when I've sure, yeah, when I first left my cult, deconstruction wasn't really a term. But I do remember telling
Mhm.
myself, as I was leaving, I was like, okay, I'm just going to break down everything I believe to the very core tenets. I believe in God and I think Jesus is really cool. And I want to see where that goes from there. And so I
Yeah.
tried mainstream Christianity. I went to like several denominations. And at some point, the more questions I had, the more I was like, I'm going to have to dig deeper. I'm going to even have to question the concept of God and Jesus. And so, I looked into other religions and I, you know, um, found out, more about what atheism truly was and secularism and secular humanism. And that seemed to align with, my beliefs a lot better. That being said, I do know of a lot of people who, when they deconstruct their beliefs, they get to a certain point, like, oh, to this point and no further, like I tried to do with the whole God Jesus thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're deconstructing, you're going to leave the concept of religion entirely. It just means that you're going to try to rid the beliefs that no longer work for you. And a lot of people end up in various places with that. I personally ended up saying, hey, I just don't need any kind of supernatural tendency to try to be a good person and reduce harm, so I'm just going to move forward from there. And that's just where I came out. But I know I have a lot of friends who have ended up differently.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you think, like, I guess this would be a question to both of you. You guys talk about conforming to reality, which I think is a good thing, right? But I think sometimes, like when it comes to supernatural, mystical, afterlife stuff, right? It's hard to 100% know what the reality is for sure, right? Like you might have a guess at what reality is and good reasons and evidence and logical thinking, right? But I guess people can have logical thinking and still come to different conclusions. So do you think it's valid to believe in things for emotional reasons as well? Like, for example, I'm going to be honest, what I was talking about earlier, the idea of afterlife and justice for my people and all that, right? Just because it makes me feel good doesn't mean that it's true. But it's not necessarily if the benefit, the emotional benefit, right, of me believing it outweighs the negative, and it's not like, making me act delusional or crazy isn't necessarily a bad thing for me to believe. And that's okay. I won't be offended, but I'm just like wondering how you guys feel about that.
Chad, I'll let you go first and then I'll follow it up.
Well, for me personally, I have, like I said, I have a lot of friends who are believers in various forms of theism. And just from my perspective, I don't think that irrational thoughts are ever going to go away from the human experience. And by irrational thoughts, I mean, things that we believe purely because of emotion or because of the comfort that it brings us. I remember one person was telling about, like, say, con artists. The way they work is that, it's not because people are stupid, it's because they're human. There are certain things that we tend to believe, and there are certain things that we tend to believe irrationally that, bring us comfort or make us feel like the world acts a certain way that honestly, may not be true, like you said. So it's part of, who we are as humans. But me personally, I feel more comfort in trying to believe in things that have evidence. And so, like you said, no one can be 100% sure what happens when you die and stuff like that. And I am okay with it being that way. I'm okay with saying, I don't know. I mean, all evidence I've seen tends to indicate that my consciousness and everything just stops, and I am as I was before I was born. I just don't exist. And I'm okay, and I'm at peace with that. But if it ends up being something else, okay, cool. I'll find out then. But I'm not going to try to convince myself, because I don't find comfort in convincing myself of something, of that magnitude without evidence. I have seen hurt done to a lot of people through those teachings. And it's something that I personally could never go back to, because so many people were hurt in the name of trying to avoid hell.
And for me, I find value in my worldview comporting with reality, and I feel like believing for emotional reasons can set you up to be emotionally manipulated into accepting things that maybe you shouldn't accept. Like I don't accept. Yeah, I don't accept. The whole idea of an afterlife and everything like that, primarily because it devalues this life that we have now. It for me, I feel like it would make you complacent with, losing loved ones and or loved ones, having their lives taken from them too early, like we're seeing, in Palestine. And I feel like that can. I'm not saying that you're this way, but I think that it can definitely lead you to being accepting of losing people when you don't need to. I think that my rejection of the afterlife puts more of an emphasis on this life and puts more value on this life so that people can live their lives to the fullest, and be happy and fulfilled people. Like, I feel like that is the best solution for that. And I get the psychological benefit to, I guess, believing in an afterlife, but I think over the long period and in general, it's actually a net negative because you open yourself up to this kind of emotional manipulation that it causes.
I hear what you're saying, but I was wondering, like, doesn't that make it difficult for you to deal with the bad things in life that you can't change, that are like overwhelmingly bad? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good reason to believe something either, right? But I've just had conversations with my other friends, I guess, who are like more leftist and progressive, and they're Muslim like me, right? And one of the things they say is like, because they fight for social justice and things like that, and they know about all the genocides going on, and they watch true crime or whatever, like they know a lot about the evil of the world. They're very aware and they're very knowledgeable. It would just be too difficult to like exist and think that that was all there is for those people. So I'm just wondering why you guys are able to handle it, like, yeah, I'm just wondering about that.
Well, yeah. So for me, it does make some things harder to deal with, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible to deal with or that it's not more psychologically healthy for you to and emotionally healthy to actually deal with them instead of. And I use this I use this analogy all the time, and maybe this is just going to date me as far as how old I am, but there's this movie called Big Daddy, and it's got Adam Sandler in
Okay.
it. And there's this one part where Adam Sandler has this kid and he feeds this kid a whole bunch of sugar, right? And he's jumping all over the place. He's bouncing everywhere and everything because he's hopped up on sugar. Well, of course that backfires. And of course he gets sick, and he vomits on the floor. Well, Adam Sandler, he comes in, he covers that vomit with paper and he just ignores it. He pretends like it's not there. Yeah, I feel like that is what it's like to use religion to deal with those harsh realities that you're talking about, because yes, it's going to psychologically affect you. Yes, it's going to be emotionally devastating or take an emotional toll on you. But I feel like what all religion does is religion is that paper that Adam Sandler's putting on the vomit and is covering it up. It's allowing it to fester. It's allowing it to smell and everything like that. Nobody wants that in their house, especially on their rug, as every dudist out there knows. Nobody wants that. And I feel like the more emotionally and psychologically healthy thing to do is to clean that vomit up and to actually deal with either your trauma or to deal with the emotional toll that something is taken on you. And I feel like dealing with that is the best way to do it. Now, that's not me saying that you can't use religion in some kind of way to do that, but I feel like if all you're going to do is sort of brush things aside with these sort of religious beliefs and not actually deal with the trauma, I feel like you're still suffering from that trauma. That trauma is still there. It's just unhandled, and it's eventually in the future going to come up, or it's going to affect you in some kind of negative way. I don't know, Chad, what do you think?
You mean like spiritual bypassing?
I guess so. I was I haven't heard that term before, but I mean, I guess
It's
bypassing
like
the trauma would
deal with your trauma and you use religion to deal with it, and then like it comes up for you later. That's what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
Is that okay? All right, thank you. I appreciate your guys' time.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Chad, did you have anything to say?
I've enjoyed this discussion. Yeah, as far as like the facing the bad things in life and everything, I hear what you're saying, especially on the point of social justice and working with people. I personally have worked with a lot of people of varying levels of belief and different beliefs, to try to accomplish social justice and address some of the problems in my community and elsewhere. Like we've done protests, we've done call in actions and stuff like that, just trying to, make our voices known and make things better for everyone. And I feel like there are shared values that can be had there. At NanoCon, I'm going to be speaking, along, or not with, but I'm going to be speaking where a Christian is actually going to be talking about, her work in opposing Christian nationalism and trying to promote justice, especially for those the LGBTQ community. Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like the shared values can be focused on, and they can work. What I see personally, though, when it comes to the overwhelming injustice, and sometimes where it feels like you're making no progress, which I understand is what your friends are feeling, is for me, from a secular side, I can I can grieve that, but I can also even more fervently look for the next good thing to do where I'm at. One of the reasons I spoke out about the cult I was in is I want to see it gone. And even though it hasn't happened yet, it's encouraged other people to come forward with their stories. And each one of those is pushing them further and further into collapse, in my opinion. I can
to clarify what you're saying,
harm.
do you feel like the lack of a belief in an afterlife makes you more fearless because you don't have like another chance? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that's part of it. I would say that knowing that this is the one chance I get to, make things better for people in the world, I'm 100% in on it. And if it doesn't happen, if we don't have a guarantee of it all being sorted out in the future, then the onus is on me to make my world just a little bit better, as it has been truly for every generation before us. It's anything that we can do to make the world better for our offspring and everything is, what we should go for, regardless of, how we think it's all going to be resolved in the end. We have now. We should focus on that and share those values.
I'm sorry. I just have one final question. I apologize, but I was wondering, like, doesn't that make you more scared to die though? Because you're like never gonna exist again, and everyone's gonna forget about you, and like that kind of makes existence like terrifying in a way. No, or like maybe it's not. But I was just wondering, like,
I mean,
how you cope with the idea of death if you're an atheist.
Right. I mean, yeah, that can be something pretty difficult to cope with. I mean, I remember for my job, I was going to have to go to the UAE, and back in 2013, and that was right after Saudi Arabia actually passed a law that atheists were to be jailed and everything like that. And I had just gotten a huge. I can't show it on cam because of YouTube and different rules there, but I've got a giant atheist tattoo on my back, and I had just gotten it done.
Oh my God.
And so I was going to the Middle East, and I had this giant atheist like sign on my back, literally. And I had to be a little bit concerned about that, but I feel like it doesn't really cause me to fear life at all. Like I fear death. It makes me a lot more concerned about my health. I'm a diabetic, and so like I have to go every 3 to 6 months to the doctor and get everything checked out to make sure I'm still healthy and everything. So like it definitely makes me consider my choices in my life to make sure that I'm making the best choices, and that I'm doing everything I can to stick around for as long as I can.
That's a really good
and for myself
answer.
Yeah, and for myself, like John said, I too am uncomfortable with the idea of death and not existing, like anybody would be. But, at the same time, I realize that it's just part of the deal. And I've just considered myself very fortunate to be conscious and alive in the time I'm in. And every day, that I go out and I, try to be a good person in my community and try to, make a difference where I can, is a day where, I still kind of look death in the face and say, yeah, I know, but I'm here now and I'm doing things. And, and I just don't feel like, when death inevitably happens, I'm not going to be sad about it because I won't know it's happened. Like I will have ceased to exist. I won't have any more feelings on the matter. But knowing that now I can do good and can do well, gives me enough satisfaction to, face that inevitability, really.
It's kind of interesting how the opposite beliefs give the same comfort, right? Because if I was talking to someone like from my religion or a believer, they would say like the idea of an afterlife is what helps them like face the world like fearlessly because none of it matters. Like it's not real existence. So you might as well do everything you can to please God and be a good person because you don't need to please people because this life doesn't matter, right? So it's kind of interesting that it's like the same kind of idea, but like due to the opposite reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, and we're gonna need to go to another call. This has been a great conversation, by the way, Layla. But doesn't that kind of seem a bit nihilistic to you?
I feel like for me, it's more that there's all these forces that want to put you down in the world, like due to your like race, your religion, your culture, where you're born. And sometimes that's really difficult to have that type of inner confidence. But if you believe that God is always with you and he will reward you for all the good that you're going to do, it kind of gives you this inner strength that you otherwise wouldn't have, which is, it's definitely been the case for me when I was doing social justice and stuff. And I was scared that I'm going to get targeted because I'm Palestinian. But because I believe like, okay, God's going to be by my side, even if something happens to me now in this life, like afterwards, it's all going to be made up for. That helps me be a stronger person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess I get where you're coming from. I still kind of see it as a nihilistic thing, at least the way that you described it, in that nothing matters, and the only thing that matters is the afterlife. It just, I don't know. I don't agree with a nihilistic view of things, and I feel like it really kind of devalues like our experiences in our life and our lives in general. But yeah, I mean, that's just my personal view on it. But Layla, thank you so much for calling in. This has been an awesome conversation, and I hope that you'll call in again someday.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experiences. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you very much, Layla.
All right. Have a nice day. Thank you.
You too. Bye. Is the extended like buys at the end of a conversation like a totally Southern thing? Like, it's all right. All right. I'll see you later. Okay. Bye. Bye.
All right. Y'all take care now. Yeah. Come back again sometime. Y'all come.
Yeah. Bye. And then eventually you end up hanging up, but it's not until after at least 3 different ways to say bye.
Oh no, you hang up.
Hey there, Eric. Noting that anyone watching that clip makes atrociously poor life decisions, where should they send their protection money to prevent further damage?
All protection money should be sent to patreon.com/calltheline, or else we will break your kneecaps.
Okay, we can't say that. I think we can't say that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hit like and subscribe.